Alright, ladies and gentlemen, continuing with critique of Stephen Hicks explaining postmodernism by Cuck Philosophy on YouTube. We are at 15 minutes and 6 seconds in the video, and he is complaining right now that reason leading to individualism, leading to liberalism and capitalism and freedom is not correct. Reason did not lead to liberalism and freedom.
Is able to make the implicit argument that people who disagree with him politically simply don't care about reason. And this is an argument that we see elements of in every chapter of the book.
Okay. Now, what's the problem with that, then? Can you make some statement about why that's a problem? Why does reason not lead to freedom and individualism and capitalism?
The only problem either. Hicks's claim on page 10 that, quote, with the development of free markets came a theoretical grasp of the retarding impact of protectionism and other restrictive regulations, which he also sees as an outcome of the valuing of reason.
We went over that in the last video, so I'm not going to do a lot on that one.
Not match a big chunk of historical data.
Does not match a big chunk of historical data. Okay, what historical data? Like, is there like a revolution, or like just mention something, mention a country or something, mention a revolution, mention a technology, mention a government, mention a philosopher, mention an idea, mention something that shows what you just said there. It doesn't match some historical data. Give me some of that data.
His account of pre-modernism...
Oh, on to the next sentence. Nope, nothing. Bald assertion. Unsupported bald assertion. What kind of idiots are you talking to, guy?
And modernism, he then goes on to a general account of postmodernism. And it's imperfect, to say the least. This is how
okay.
characterizes deconstructive literary criticism. Quote, the task of the literary critic, accordingly, is to deconstruct the text to reveal the author's race, sex, or class interest.
Now, is that what they do nowadays in literary criticism? Do they deconstruct it and talk about race, sex, and class interests? Is that what they do? Is that what they do or not? That's what they do.
And further, literary criticism becomes a form of subjective play.
Literary criticism is a form of subjective play in which the reader pours subjective associations into the text. Yeah. Instead of asking, what did the author mean, you just interpret it with you. You become an active part of it, they say. Yeah, that's what they do. Yeah, that's true.
In which the reader pours subjective associations into the text. Hicks doesn't provide any sources for these claims.
Alright, well, are they substantive or not? Is that what we see in every university in the land or not? That is what we see. That's what, you know what, even if you won't admit it, buddy, that's what rational people see, okay? So, are you going to address that?
So, I don't know where he got this from. Maybe he's referring to some deconstructive method I don't know about. But that's pretty much the opposite of how Derrida, the father of deconstruction, of course, conceived of deconstruction.
Oh, alright, so he's not going to address it in any substantive way. He's now going to go on and mention Derrida. Now, what's he going to say about Derrida, who's one of the biggest scumbags of postmodernism ever? I would like to take Derrida and tie him to a chair and have bad things able to do and ask him if there is a real external reality or not. That's what I'd like to do with Derrida.
A basic tenet of deconstruction is that you don't bring anything into the text from the outside. Instead, you examine the internal logic of the text. You find tensions in the text using only the tools provided by the text itself. Instead of critiquing it from the outside or from a bird's eye perspective, you examine it from the inside. The pouring in of subjective associations is precisely what this prevents. As Professor Jack Reynolds says in the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, deconstruction
is committed to the rigorous analysis of the literal meaning of a text, and yet also to finding within that meaning, perhaps in the neglected corners, internal problems that actually point towards alternative meanings. Alright, so he's saying the idea that it's a subjective nonsense vomiting onto the text, which is what it is, we all know that's what they do. He says the idea that that's the case couldn't possibly be the case, because Derrida said that you can't be subjective about the text. Well, was Derrida a champion of objectivity? And then this guy says, what is that term here, this phrase, this fragment of the sentence here? Yet also to finding within that meaning, perhaps in the neglected corners. What is the neglected corner? Including the footnotes. Internal problems. Internal problems? Like you're just saying that about all literature, period. Really? Internal problems? What are the internal problems of Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky? You know, you read it as a piece of literature that stands by itself as a statement from Dostoevsky. It's internal problems that point towards alternative meanings. Yeah, that is garbage stuff there, dude. That is the postmodernist stuff. Now, to prove this, to say that this disproves the stuff he pointed earlier, these are birds of a feather, son.
Committed to the rigorous analysis of the literal meaning of it.
Oh, because they say rigorous analysis and they use the term literal meaning. Well, they then dispense with literal meaning when they say neglected problems, internal problems, alternative meanings. They don't care about the literal meaning if they want alternative meanings and they're looking for internal problems and neglected corners. Is that what the literal meaning is? Neglected corners, internal problems, alternative meanings is the literal meaning? So they fooled him, didn't they? In that sentence, they said literal meaning, and then they negated themselves, and he went for it. He bought it hook, line, and sinker, didn't he? A rigorous analysis based on alternative meanings and internal problems. A rigorous analysis. They fooled you.
And yet also to finding within that meaning, perhaps in the neglected corners of the text, including the footnotes, internal problems that actually point towards alternative meanings. And Derrida himself identifies his deconstructive strategy with a, quote, desire to be faithful to the themes and audacities of a thinking.
Now, when you're trying to destroy culture and ruin everybody and ruin everything, do you come out and say that you're trying to destroy culture, ruin everybody, and ruin everything? Or do you say that you're trying to be faithful to the themes and the audacities of thinking? What the hell is audacities? What does that mean? Why would he say that? That's where the real truth of it is. He put the word audacities in there because he's not trying to be faithful to the themes of thinking. He wants the word audacities to be in there for whatever meaning he puts in there. So, because he was a nihilist, and he couldn't spit in people's face and tell them that he was a nihilist, so he fools this guy, right?
Later, on page 190, Hicks says, quote, deconstruction allows you to dismiss whole literary and legal traditions as built upon sexist or racist or otherwise exploitative assumptions. It provides a justification for setting them aside. This completely contradicts the deep respect Derrida exhibited for the Western canon.
Well, then why do they just set aside whole canons of literature? Why do they do that? Why does that happen? That actually is happening. We know it's happening. We know the universities are banning books and banning authors and banning speakers. We know that's happening. But he dismisses all that. Says, don't worry about that because Derrida had a deep respect for the mind.
His entire bibliography emerged in dialogue with Western classics. This stereotype is generally strange.
So he can't be fighting against the West. He can't be a destroyer of the West. He can't be a harbinger of destruction. He can't be a nihilist because he read the classics. Pretty strong. Just about your strongest argument yet, I have to say. That one right there.
Postmodern philosophers have often drawn from books within the Western canon for insights and sources of inspiration. Often, Hicks puts forth misrepresentations and misreadings so common and cliched that you can watch decades-old lectures and feel like they're directly responding to Stephen Hicks.
So, maybe that's an indication that Stephen Hicks is having a conversation with ideas that span decades and centuries. He can't conceive of that. You have to update everything that goes on with your resources and the current lectures and what's been going on in the last 2 to 3 years, or you're behind the times. Because they do not, Marxists like this guy, Platonists like this guy, don't have principles that stretch across decades and centuries. They have to update according to the newest discoveries. He probably believes that we should use science to decide our ethics. He's probably one of those guys.
199, he says, quote, "Deconstruction has the effect of leveling all meaning and value. If a text can mean anything, then it means nothing more than anything else. No texts are then great."
Yes, they have accomplished their goal of egalitarianism of literature. If every single piece of literature is as good as any other piece of literature, then there are no great writers, and then any little guy who sits down and writes any piece of garbage trash is equal to the great writers, Dostoevsky, whoever you want to name. Yeah, that's egalitarianism in literature, and deconstruction does accomplish that goal. That's true.
There is no interpretation that can bring interpretation to an end. Good books, really great texts, do not cut off interpretation. They lead to multiple interpretations. Great examples of this would be the Bible, which I think is pretty obvious. Now, the converse is the claim that people find outrageous, but it's not made by Derrida. That means since there's no the right way, then any way is as good as any other. Now, Derrida is not compelled to hold that view, and he doesn't. Not every way to speak and or read is as good as every other. And let me just put it simply. No one holds that view.
We'll get back to postmodernism, but for now, let's go to chapter 2, where
You know, I'm tempted to try to find meaning in that. I'm tempted to go back and listen to it again and see try to get the narrative that he's trying to stitch together. But I'm not going to, because I realized that was a series of clips that were cut together by this guy, Cuck Philosophy. And I don't trust his ability to cut together a meaningful series of clips. So I'm not going to go back and just sit there and watch all those and try to get the narrative. And at the end, throw my arms up and say, what a bunch of garbage, he can't even cut together a meaningful set of clips. Because you can rewind and listen to it if you want. But I could not follow what he was trying to do there. And as much as I like to rewind and make sure I get every single bit of these things, I'm not going to do it this time. I'm just going to keep going because I don't trust him. I don't think he did a good job of cutting those together into a meaningful point or narrative. And I'm afraid it would just take too long to figure out what he's doing.
Starts his broad historical account of the counter-enlightenment, starting with Kant. Yes, you heard me right. The counter-enlightenment starting with Kant.
Alright, so reason comes from the senses. Reason and the senses are associated. Don't get me off on that, it's fine. Reason and senses are associated. Kant comes along and says that the senses actually aren't reliable. Okay, so that was undercutting reason. And then ever since then, since our senses aren't reliable, everyone is just splintering into the thing that makes sense for them emotionally, without checking on the external reality. Just use your emotions. And so people are grouping up based on their emotions, and that's called tribalism. So yeah, that's Immanuel Kant. Now, his mind is blown by the idea that Kant is against reason. It just blows his hippie noodle. He's never heard of such a thing. Immanuel Kant is the paragon of reason for cucks like this. The paragon of reason. So it just blows his hippie noodle.
Where his gross misrepresentations of modern philosophy begin. Now, if you're a Kant scholar, or if you've studied Kant formally, or if you're just a fan of Kant...
If you're a Kant scholar, if you've studied him formally, or if you're a fan of him, you're going to be very upset that Stephen Hicks is saying that Kant is against reason. I don't know.
Warned that the following might make you frustrated. Stephen Hicks, flying in the face of all Kantian scholarship...
Flying in the face of all Kantian scholarship. Go ahead.
There's that Kant is a counter-enlightenment philosopher.
Kant is a counter-enlightenment philosopher. Flying in the face of all Kantian scholarship? Now, if that sentence is true, then MrCropper is the only person in the world besides Stephen Hicks who thinks that Kant is an anti-enlightenment philosopher. And MrCropper is not original in that view.
This is very strange because most accounts of the Enlightenment see Kant as a great contributor to Enlightenment philosophy. In What is Enlightenment, Kant wrote that the Enlightenment is man's release from self-incurred tutelage, the overcoming of man's inability to make use of his understanding without direction from another. So, on what basis does Hicks consider Kant to be a counter-Enlightenment philosopher? Well, he says that Kant attacked contributor to Enlightenment philosophy. In What is Enlightenment, Kant wrote that the Enlightenment is man's release from self-incurred tutelage.
All right. He's correct about that, isn't he? That's what the Enlightenment was. So Kant said a correct thing. Now, does that wipe out his entire philosophy and all the things he said about epistemology?
The overcoming of man's inability to make use of his understanding without direction.
So Kant wants to overcome the human inability to make use of his understanding without direction from another. So we should have the ability to understand things without referring to other people in any way. Now, in his attempt to do that, he cut us all off from reality completely. He said there's no reality, none of us can access reality at all. So other people can't tell you what to think in your mind because they don't know anything. They're cut off from reality. So in his attempt to do that, he cut us all off from reality. So, do you have a reply to that? Do you know anything about Kant's philosophy at all?
Another. So, on what basis does Hicks consider Kant to be a counter-Enlightenment philosopher?
Maybe on the basis of his entire philosophy.
Well, he says that Kant attacked Enlightenment reason, that Kant concluded that objectivity must be abandoned, and that our reason is limited to structuring our subjective creations.
Yeah, that's a really, really good summation of Kant right there. I don't take any exception to any of that. Hicks, you're a pretty good guy. Are you an objectivist?
Now, anyone who has read any book by Kant will know how absurd these accusations are.
They're just absurd, huh? Nope. They're really good. You ladies and gentlemen, can go read Kant for yourself if you like. I've done videos on Kant before, and maybe I should do more videos on Kant again. Those are old, poor quality, low quality videos that are on my channel about Kant. Maybe I should do some more videos about Kant, huh?
First of all, saying that Kant rejected objectivity is really strange considering his entire epistemological project was an attempt to ground objective knowledge in the face of Hume's skepticism.
Alright, he was attempting to ground knowledge, alright? So in his attempt to ground knowledge, he destroyed knowledge and reason. Now, do you have any response to the fact that he destroyed knowledge and reason? No, he has no response to the fact. Kant was a paragon of reason.
To say that Kant is against reason makes no sense considering to what extent he utilized reason and clarified its conditions.
He worshipped reason. His book is a series of equivocations that's hundreds of pages long. I mean, of course, what else would he use? He was an Enlightenment person. That's what they used then. That's all they had. Reason. Everybody else was being laughed at during the Enlightenment, right? If you were a preacher or whatever, you were being laughed at. And there were waves of religious reawakenings in the 1800s in America. Mormonism was one of them. But in the 1700s, everybody was being laughed at who said that they were getting messages from God. So Kant he sat down and he reasoned out why we have no connection to reality and why we can never know anything in his attempt to defend faith. You know, in his attempt to give an objective account of something. He cut us off from reality and destroyed the mind. Well, can you come to grips with that fact or not? Hicks has done a really good job of summarizing it right there. You can't reply to that at all except to say that it's utter garbage.
Kant rejected objectivity is really strange considering his entire epistemological project was an attempt to ground objective knowledge in the face of Hume's skepticism. To say that Kant is against reason makes no sense considering to what extent he utilized reason.
Alright, so there's Hume dancing on thin ice. And Kant goes out to tell Hume that this is dangerous, and then they both fall through. And he says that because Immanuel Kant didn't want Hume to fall through, therefore they didn't fall through and they weren't actually out on the ice to begin with. Okay, that's my analogy of his analysis of the situation. Okay, Immanuel Kant, doing whatever he wanted to do, did destroy reason, and he was an anti-enlightenment thinker, and he is the scourge of the modern world, and he is at the basis of every theory that is horrific today, And that is the case, and you're not doing a very good job of addressing that fact.
Clarified its conditions and praised it in his works. And to say that for Kant our reason is limited to structuring our subjective creations is flat out false, because Kant very clearly stated that what our categories of understanding structure is not subjective creations, but sensory data given to us by the thing in itself, which is...
Yes, and the categories cut us off. So yes, that's true. He's got this kind of right. But if there's something between us and reality, the categories, then we don't get access to reality. We just work with categories. So Kant has destroyed external reality right here. You're talking about it right here, the thing in itself. Not external reality, but some platonic in-between thing that's a distortion caused by our senses that we can never know the real reality behind it. We just have to deal with these categories. Yes, he destroyed external reality, and he destroyed reason, and he destroyed the mind, and you've got it right here. You're talking about it right here.
Kant's term for external things outside of relations to human subjects. On page 41, he says that, quote, "The key point about Kant is that he prohibits knowledge of anything outside of our skulls." Again, this is flat out wrong. Our skulls, as well as the empirical world in which they exist, are possible objects of experience, and therefore, for Kant, are subject to scientific, empirical, and objective inquiry.
Yes, but what happens when you do that empirical inquiry? What is the essence of scientific inquiry for Kant? It's dealing with the categories, not with reality. That's the whole point of Kant, which you were just going over in your stupid little graphic, which you apparently don't grasp even the essence of, let alone any of the stuff that was going on in it. I don't want to look at the graphic.
Made it pretty clear that he was an empirical realist. It seems that Hicks...
Kant was an empirical realist. Kant was an empirical realist. The anti-reason philosopher that cuts us off from reality and says that our senses do not connect to reality but only to categories inside of our mind, and that we have to deal with those categories in our mind, and all of us just forget about the external reality because we can never know it anyway. That guy is an empirical realist. Really? Really? You know, if there's anybody watching this video who believes that, then they probably have no idea what empirical realism is. No idea at all. So, if you get anybody to believe this garbage, they probably are extremely stupid and uneducated. Again, is that the audience you want? Maybe that's the only audience you can even aim at. Maybe that's just the bird of the feather, huh?
And one of the basic points of Kant's critique, and the way in which Kant critiqued reason. It's not that Kant criticized reason as a whole, far from it. He placed it on a very high pedestal. One must simply read the title of his first critique.
Yeah, well, Plato did reason. Everybody does reason. Reason's the only thing that you have, except in the post-Kantian world where reason has been destroyed. Now we don't have reason anymore. Nobody can use reason, and people are actually attacking reason itself. But Kant used reason. It's the only thing he could use. Now, if you use reason and you connect it to reality through the five senses, by always giving a concrete example of what you're talking about so that you're never doing floating garbage, if you use reason in that way, then you can get pretty far scientifically and philosophically. But if you use reason as disconnected from the senses, and if you use reason as a platonic floating abstraction that has nothing to do with reality, then you're just playing in unicorn la-la land. And that is the absolute definition of Immanuel Kant. Cut it off from reality, just deal with it in this world of categories, and so the idea that he is a paragon of reason needs to be looked at through that lens. You know, Marx was a paragon of reason, but was he an Aristotelian? All right.
Of pure reason. By pure, he means reason detached from empirical observation.
All right, good. So I just went over that. Reason detached from empirical observation is unicorn la-la land nonsense. So, Kant destroyed reason by detaching it from reality.
Kant reason is able to rationally structure empirical experience, but when detached from empirical experience, it can lead to all kinds of contradictory conclusions. The critique was partially an attack against fuzzy, empirically insensitive philosophy.
All right. So, if he can actually believe that Kant was defending objective scientific thinking, then that's amazing. That's amazing. I don't know what to say to that, except to say I would have to debate him. We would take Immanuel Kant's works and we would have to sit down and we'd have to go over it sentence by sentence. And I would say, what do you think that sentence means? And I'd have to say, give me an example of that. We'd have to really work it through because this guy is bad. Bad, naughty, naughty, naughty.
Page 108, Hicks even says that, quote, Kant blamed mankind for having chosen to use reason when our instincts could have served us perfectly well.
Oh.
Just what? A common criticism of Kant's ethics is the opposite, that they are too based on cold reason and detached from sentiment. It's a very, very basic and foundational aspect of Kant's moral philosophy that morality is based on universal, practical reason.
Yes, the problem with Kant's morality is that you can't get anything for yourself out of it. So really, the only way to satisfy his moral code is to sacrifice yourself without any benefit. No benefit. Not even an incidental benefit. Your action is not moral unless you gain absolutely no benefit from it. Okay? That's Kant. That's Kant's ethics. All right?
Says that the reason Kant adopted anti-reason views is because of religious motivations. Quote, he saw the beating that religion had taken at the hands of the Enlightenment thinkers, so he realized that we need to decide which has priority, reason or religion. Kant firmly chose religion.
Yeah, Kant said that. He said he was trying to defend faith. Yeah, that's true.
Again, just mind-boggling.
That's Kant. Kant said he was trying to defend faith. Why is that mind-boggling?
It would have been more accurate to say that Kant was the one doing the beating against religion. At least the way it was.
All right, now, Kant said he was trying to defend religion. Then he comes out with this mess of a philosophy that destroys the mind. And people all around him say, this is a mess. This philosophy is destructive and it destroys the mind. Okay, so preachers hated it, because they're religious and they believe there is an external world and we can know something, right? So even religious preachers hated it, and because religious preachers spoke out against Immanuel Kant, therefore what? Everyone spoke out against
reason
Kant.
Or religion. Kant firmly chose religion. Again, just mind-boggling. It would have been more accurate to say that Kant was the one doing the beating against religion, at least the way it was conceived in theology at the time. Some of the main targets of Kant's critiques of pure reason were rationalistic arguments for the existence of God and the existence of the soul. Kant believed that those arguments were invalid because they were detached from possible objects of experience. He was commonly criticized by theologians for trying to destroy the foundations of religion. In fact, it was for this reason that he was famously termed the all-destroyer.
The all-destroyer. That's Immanuel Kant for you, the all-destroyer. Even the people at the time, even religious people, were able to tell that Kant's philosophy was extremely destructive, cuts us off from reality, gives no account of the five senses, destroys the five senses, says we can never know anything of the five senses or through them. We only know categories inside of our skull. Right? That's Kant's whole philosophy. The all-destroyer. Yeah, even religious people understood that. And because religious people understood that and attacked him, therefore, Immanuel Kant couldn't have been defending faith. All right, if that's the best you can do, again, that is the best you can do. Well, we're getting close to 30 minutes, so before starting on the next bit, let's leave it there. We're at 23:03. MrCropper signing out.